I was doing a family service when Eliana was little and had her on my hip, and I had the microphone because I came down to be with the kids and the parents, and she said, "I'm singing, Mama," and we were singing. I'm like, "Yes, you are, baby. It's so great." She goes, "I'm singing, Mama." I said, "Yes, you are. I love to hear you sing. I singing, Mama." I said, "Yes, dear. I know." She takes the microphone and she goes, "I singing, Mama." Well, we got one right here coming up. We love that. So we just read Torah. We just read Parshat Nitzavim. We just read about standing, all of us together. Atem nitzavim kulchem hayom lifnei Adonai Elohechem. All y'all stand before Adonai your God today. Atem, y'all, kulchem, all y'all. Everybody, and then it delineates every single level of society according to status, according to age, according to all kinds of things, occupation. Everybody stood there to make that agreement that they put in the mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu. We're in the book of Deuteronomy right now. We're getting ready to finish it. As you know, Simchas Torah is coming, so we'll finish Deuteronomy and begin Genesis, begin Bereshit. We've been studying Deuteronomy. We've been studying the laws of Deuteronomy. We've been studying what kind of a society Deuteronomy imagined. And it was revolutionary in its time, the book of Deuteronomy and the law code within, but also the structure of the kind of civilization that Deuteronomy laid out was absolutely unique in the ancient world in that the king was often associated with the deity, and the deity gives the law to the king. And this is the time when Deuteronomy is written where the king of Assyria rules supreme in the region and was known for horrific acts of brutality to any city that refused to pay the levy. What do they call it? You know what I'm talking about. To the crown, if they wouldn't pay it, the consequences were absolutely horrific, and they publicized those consequences in stela, right? They made sculpture, big images of what happens to people who cross the king of Assyria and don't pay and dare to rebel. This is the situation when Deuteronomy is written. The revolution of Deuteronomy that our ancestors of this country, the founders of this country drew on, was that the king was subject to the law. The king was not the lawgiver. The king was subject to the law. There was an independent judiciary that Deuteronomy puts in place. This took away power from the elders, who had traditionally been the ones to wield all the power in any kind of decision-making that happened in the community. It took away the power from anyone else who felt they had the right to sit in judgment. And it put the judgment in the hands of people who would be guided morally, ethically, by wise minds, patient hearts. And of course, we hear over and over again about not showing favor either to the poor or to the wealthy in a trial, but to the evidence. And the judges would decide in the gates of the city. This is a political overhaul in the ancient world. What we don't often talk about, some of us, not everybody, because not everybody's as square as rabbis, but we talk about like the beauty of the vision of Deuteronomy and how our founding folks here in this country used it and were inspired by it to make a constitution, because the king, according to Deuteronomy, had to write a copy of the law, write out by hand a copy of the law and study it every day. Hence our Constitution and the fact that we're all supposed to know the Constitution. That's all Deuteronomy. What we don't often talk about is the fact that Deuteronomy was written at the time of King Josiah in response to Assyria conquering the northern kingdom of Israel. Deuteronomy is not written by a united monarchy. Deuteronomy is written after the horrific, awful fall of the north to Assyria and the terrors that Assyria brought on the citizenship of northern Israel. Refugees fled into Judah, And Deuteronomy is crafted in Judah. So what is Deuteronomy exactly? Deuteronomy is a response to catastrophe. Deuteronomy is a response to we think it may all be coming apart. The project may be over. The United Monarchy project was over. Kingdom of Israel was over. But what was the Jewish people's response in Judah? Was it to say there's nothing we can do? Oh my God, Assyria is coming for us? If it got them, it's going to get us? No, that's not what they did. In the face of catastrophe and the fear that the project may finally be over for us and all the horrible things that will flow from that, they got working. They got busy thinking about how can we totally think differently about the way we've been doing things. Maybe what happened to them doesn't have to happen to us if we get our act together. Maybe. We've just come through a catastrophe. The destruction of our beloved town. And even if you weren't in the Palisades, you are catastrophe adjacent. And if that wasn't enough, look around the world. It's a catastrophe. Many of us are afraid of what's happening here at home. Many of us so deeply concerned what's happening in Israel and everywhere in the world. So when catastrophe strikes and we don't know where the heck to turn, and then you're supposed to talk to a bunch of Jews on the most important day of their year, what do as a rabbi? You start reading. So I started reading. And one of the first books I read was Holy Resilience by a biblical scholar, a Christian biblical scholar who's a specialist in the Old Testament. And he talked about Deuteronomy being a text of terror, essentially. A text written in catastrophe. And he said, Jewish scriptures were formed in the context of centuries of catastrophic suffering, particularly group suffering. Texts once famous all over the world, from the kingdoms of Egypt, Assyria, Babylonia, died with the empires they celebrated. The embedding of survival of trauma into the Bible provides a partial answer to why Jewish scriptures flourished when imperial scripture did not. The huge empires, their scripture's gone, people. Their stories are gone. We're about to start Genesis again. We were a tiny little provincial kingdom in the middle of a highway. We were a pit stop on the highway. And our scripture's still here 3,000 years later and informs both Christianity and Islam. And think about how many people in the world that touches. Why? He argues, David Carr, because our texts come out of trauma. Why would that make them last? He says experiences of suffering can teach forms of wisdom that transcend their original contexts. In at least some situations, trauma can strip away one's illusions. One's illusions of safety, one's illusions that you're going to have everything tomorrow that you had yesterday in your home, that you'd have a home, that you could go to your favorite restaurant. It strips that away. And the wisdom that comes from the shattering of illusion frees us also from habit and the constraints of thinking inside the box. That can result in despair. For the Israelites, it could have meant, of Judah, it could have meant recommitting to the king of Assyria to stay safe. But that's not what the Jewish people are and never have been. Instead of turning away from bigger, broader issues, Deuteronomy addresses them head on. Poverty, homelessness, victimization, marginalization, oppression, all of it Deuteronomy addresses head on. Rather than back off saying, obviously we're too weak to do anything, they dug in. They dug in and tried to address the problems that they ignored most of the time before catastrophe. That has happened to us. I don't know if y'all feel that way, but I do. Rabbi Reuben spoke about it, Erev Rosh Hashanah. The way people have come together after this fire, the way people have been so incredibly generous to so many of us who stood wearing only clothes given to us for so long. And Lonnie, I'm still wearing your blouse today. So the gratitude is not the word for what we felt on the receiving end of so much generosity and compassion and understanding and empathy and care. There are no words for it. But it turns out, argues Rebecca Solnit, in A Paradise Built in Hell, that's not unusual. This is actually typical. People think there's going to be fighting for resources and people are going to turn on each other and survival of the fittest and everybody's going to be grabbing and shoving and pushing. Turns out that's not what people do. Turns out in the 5 catastrophes that she researched and talked to people in those communities, they experienced exactly what we did. People came together. People didn't care about what they used to care about so much. They looked out for who didn't have access, who needed, who could they help, who could they send to help, how can I volunteer to help, who needs our care, how can we get resources to them, what do they need, how do we figure out what they need. This is what happened. Innovative thinking, creative thinking when there's no power. How do you feed all of these people after the San Francisco fires that came after the earthquake? People got creative and they got energized. And the interesting thing she found when she talked to these communities is that when she asked about those days immediately after the catastrophe, people got this incredible look of wistful joy on their faces. She could not understand why people wouldn't turn, their faces into a response to the horror of what happened. Instead, they had this wistful sense of joy in connection to so many people and to what was important and to having purpose and to having meaning in their lives, front and center in their lives, instead of the stuff we usually do. So she researched it. Is that true in other communities? And it turns out it was. This is the unique experience of people coming through catastrophe. There can be a pulling together, a sense of shared commitment to a larger project. It sounds odd, I know, but any of us who have felt it have really felt it. There's a difference in who I am now from the person I was before I lost everything. That is, everything physical and all of the ways that those were touchstones for memories and connections back for me and for my daughter. But part of the reason we don't have a language to talk about it and we really don't get it is because our culture doesn't celebrate that. What our culture, when we talk about love, when we talk about meaning, we talk about our immediate family and we talk about our partner. We don't talk about what it means to love in a broader sense as a citizen. My first cousin's sitting here. You just spoke about your grandfather. Our grandfather loved this country. His son, my father, served this country. We were brought up to love the idea of America. And we were always reminded of what she should be and could be, what she's been for the Jews that we've never had in the world before. We don't talk like that anymore. We don't talk about service to the ideals and the vision of this country. It touched my grandfather who came here from Russia with nothing. They weren't just ideas. They changed their lives. They gave them a future. They gave them meaning and hope and purpose. And they became people who dug in and gave back. But we don't talk like that anymore. We suffer, says Rebecca Solnit, from social alienation, meaningless, and other enemies arising from something other than familiar or erotic love. Disaster often provides the impetus and opportunity for people to be engaged in the larger world. That has certainly happened for us in the Palisades. We have come out of our kind of ways of living our everyday lives. We are now talking actively as an interfaith clergy community about how KI, which is still standing, can serve in our community for congregations who's lost their home. The Methodist Church burned down. The Presbyterian Church burned down. The Catholic Church burned down. Where are they going to go? They don't have us. We know what it feels like to now be in Galut, in the Palisadian exile. We know what that feels like, how hard it is to connect. But we have something to go home to. We have a building to go back to. What about those congregations who don't? How can we help them? And it isn't just about letting them come worship on Sundays either. We're in a new time. We're in a new paradigm. Now it's going to be, how do we do stuff together? How do we do stuff as a faith community together? And how do we reach out to people who are unchurched and say, you know what? It doesn't have to be a certain theology. Just come join us for this amazing spiritually based yoga, for a spiritually based meditation and mindfulness experience, for some chant, just from all kinds of traditions. What would it look like in the Palisades if we allowed this catastrophe to bust us wide open? To start a new paradigm like Deuteronomy did and said, we've been thinking about this the wrong way. If we want to thrive and not just complain about what we're frightened of or what's not working, how do we start talking about what we love about this country, about our community? And how do we start living and acting from there? Believing that it's possible to think outside the box that was blown up, that burned down. It is the disruptive power of disaster that matters, Solnit writes. The ability of disasters to topple old orders and open new possibilities. That's where we are. That's where we are. Can we take this and use it to address things in our larger country community, the world community? What if, when Esther is afraid to go to the king, because she knows if you go uninvited to the king, what happens? She's got to tell him she's a Jew when the decree's been given to murder all Jews. How would you feel? Esther is terrified, and she sends word to Mordecai that she's terrified. And Mordecai says some stuff, but at the end of the stuff he says, Umi yodea im le'et kazot higat lemalchut. Who knows? He doesn't say it's true. God says, I promise, I know. He says, mi yodea. Who knows? Who knows what? Im le'et kazot higat lemalchut. That for a time like this, you came to royal power. Who knows? What he was telling her is that she had a superpower. She didn't ask for it, but she had a superpower now. As did Joseph, who didn't ask for it either. And Joseph got there too by losing everything twice. Everything. Who knows, if not for a time like this, that we have come into our superpower. Maybe our superpower, living in the immediate shadow of the destruction of our own town and of so many of our private homes. Perhaps our superpower now is having a different perspective that we can bring to this country, that we can bring to the wider world, and the challenges that are leaving everyone feeling so small and helpless and vulnerable, like the project might be over. This is beyond rebuilding. This is reconstructing. This is what is before us. The possibility of contributing our unique gift right now of a vision that's been freed from the blinders that we walk around with so much of the time. The wisdom from experiencing this, she says, counts. Because what matters here matters elsewhere. Meaning, how we handle this and how we come out of this and what we might contribute, it doesn't just matter here locally, it matters other places, it matters everywhere. I went to the After the Fire Summit, the Wildfire Summit, the National Wildfire Summit, watching people from victims of wildfire from all over the place, from Lahaina and Maui to Malibu to Sonoma to lots of different places. And we were all there together. And it's contagious. This sense of, yes, we can figure out a new way. It's not going to be the ways we've done it before. That's all gone. It's been blown up. But we can figure out a new way. We can reconstruct things in a new way. And it was inspirational. It matters, she says, particularly in a time when we are moving into more natural disasters than ever. People are going to need us. They're going to need what we've learned. They're going to need what we've experienced in coming together, in a larger coming together. This world needs what we learned, what we're still doing, and what we're going to do for a long time. That we can come back to a love that is bigger than just our family or our small neighborhood. We can have a passion and not be embarrassed about it or ashamed about it. A passion for this country, what she should be, for Israel and what she should be, and what we can do here together. May we take seriously Mi Yodea. Who knows if it wasn't for this moment in time that we have been given knowledge, experience, commitment, and passion that this world so desperately needs. Chag Sameach.